The air inside the room felt thick, as if the walls themselves had absorbed every ounce of tension that had been building for weeks. Every cast member sat in complete silence, their bodies still but their minds racing, because everyone could feel it. Something was about to break. They didn't know exactly what form it would take, but they knew when it came, there would be no going back. At one end of the table, Spice sat upright with her back straight and her chin high, her expression unreadable, but her presence commanding. Her hands rested loosely in her lap, fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm that seemed to echo the countdown in her mind. She wasn't nervous, she wasn't unsure, she was preparing to drop the kind of truth that didn't just sting, but sliced straight through whatever illusions people had been clinging to. Across from her, Bambi shifted in her seat, unable to keep her hands still. She tried to disguise the subtle tremor in her fingers by clasping them together, but the movement only betrayed the unrest boiling beneath her skin. For so long, she had convinced herself she could hold her story together, that the pieces of her carefully built image could stay in place if she just smiled at the right times, cried when it suited her, and avoided letting anyone see too much. But the truth was heavier than she had anticipated, and as the days dragged on, she felt the walls inching closer, the air thinning. Now, in this moment, she could practically hear the bricks shifting, ready to crash down. She told herself to breathe evenly, to meet Spice's gaze without flinching, but her eyes betrayed her. A flicker here, a downward glance there, cracks showing in a mask she had worn for far too long. This wasn't just another on-camera spat, another exchange of insults that would be edited into dramatic television. This was different. Spice had a look in her eyes that promised there would be no escape route, no clever spin to change the narrative. When Spice finally rose from her chair, the movement was slow, deliberate, almost theatrical. Her heels clicked, softly against the floor, each step purposeful, drawing the attention of every pair of eyes in the room without a single word spoken. She stopped just a few feet from Bambi, her gaze locking onto her with a sharp intensity that made the air between them feel electric. And then, in a voice that was smooth but laced with steel, she spoke words that landed like the opening shot of a war. I think it's time we all find out who the real Bambi is. No raised voice, no shouted accusation, just a calm, controlled sentence that seemed to shift the very atmosphere. Bambi's stomach knotted instantly, the kind of knot that tightens when you know something you've been hiding is about to be yanked into the light. She tried to keep her tone steady, to sound confused instead of cornered. "What are you even talking about?" she asked, her voice pitched a little higher than she intended. Her gaze darted quickly around the room, searching for a friendly face, someone who might jump in, laugh it off, claim it was all being blown out of proportion. But the room remained silent. Not a single person spoke. They were all looking at her, but none of them were looking to defend her. It was the kind of silence that made the truth feel inevitable. Spice didn't bother with a drawn-out explanation. Instead, she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and with a few taps, summoned something far more dangerous than words. "Let me show you something," she said, her tone almost casual, though her eyes never wavered. She held the phone, out so the rest of the cast could see, angling it just enough for the screen's glow to reflect in their wide eyes. A few seconds of buffering felt like an eternity, and then the image snapped into focus. Gasps rippled through the room in unison as the video began to play. On the small screen, there was Bambi, not standing beside her husband Scrappy, not sharing a casual conversation, but leaning close into the arms of another man. Her laugh was soft, almost intimate, the kind of sound you only share when you think no one else can hear. She whispered something to him, words muffled by the cameras, distance, but her body language said enough. And the man, he wasn't just anyone. He was Spice's ex. That detail hit the room like a jolt of electricity, drawing sharp inhales and shocked stares. Betrayal wasn't a new concept in this circle, but this was something personal. Bambi felt the blood drain from her face as she stared at the evidence looping on the screen. There was no mistaking it, no way to claim it was someone else, no clever excuse to discredit the source. It was her. It was real. And it was devastating. Spice's voice cut through the stunned quiet like a blade. "You think this is some kind of joke?" she asked, her tone ice cold, her words deliberate. "This isn't a storyline. This is who you are. You've been lying to Scrappy, lying to every single one of us, and now everyone can see the truth for themselves." Bambi's throat felt tight, her mouth dry, but she forced herself to speak. "It's not what it looks like," she tried, though the words sounded thin even to her own ears. She rose to her feet, though her knees felt unsteady, and attempted to salvage something. Anything. "It was a stupid mistake, that's all. It didn't mean anything." Spice didn't even blink. Her response was swift and merciless. "A mistake is spilling coffee on someone. A mistake is forgetting a name. This? You were in my ex's bed. That's not an accident. That's a choice. And you've been playing all of us while you smile to our faces." The room seemed to shrink around Bambi, every glance another weight pressing down on her. She turned her eyes toward Scrappy, who had been standing near the back, silent, but watching. His face was unreadable, but his stillness spoke volumes. His chest rose and fell slowly, his jaw set tight. When his eyes met hers, the look in them made her breath catch, a mix of hurt, disbelief, and something colder than anger. He didn't shout, didn't demand answers. He just looked at her like she was someone he had never truly known. Spice's voice softened slightly as she addressed him. "You've been played, Scrappy. We all have." Bambi took a hesitant step toward him, her hand lifting instinctively, but he moved back, his head shaking in quiet refusal. "Don't," he said, barely above a whisper. "Don't you dare try to explain it now." The sound of his voice, so restrained yet final, landed harder than if he'd screamed. She could hear every ounce of pain behind it. "I gave you everything," Scrappy said finally, his voice breaking just enough to betray the depth of the wound. "I loved you, and you used that love like it was nothing." His words echoed in the heavy silence that followed, and with each one, Bambi felt herself splintering. There was nothing left to say that could undo the image now burned into everyone's mind. Nothing to change the fact that the people who had once believed in her now looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. Scrappy turned and walked away, his footsteps loud in the quiet room. Every step he took felt like another piece of her life being stripped away. And as she watched him leave, she realized with a sinking clarity that this wasn't just the loss of a relationship. It was the unraveling of the entire identity she had built. The room was a vacuum after Scrappy walked out, the kind of silence that didn't just exist in sound, but pressed down like a physical weight on everyone's shoulders. Even the subtle hum of the lights seemed to fade into nothing, as if the air itself was holding its breath. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak. It was as if they all collectively understood that anything they said right now would either turn into ammunition or get swallowed whole by the heaviness settling over the space. Bambi stood rooted where she was, every muscle in her body tense, her heartbeat so loud in her own ears she wondered if anyone else could hear it. She could feel their stares, some burning with judgment, others glazed over, in shock, a few tinged with the kind of satisfaction that comes when someone you've silently resented finally trips in public. Her fingers twitched at her sides, itching to reach for her phone, to check the flood of notifications she knew were already waiting for her. But she didn't. She couldn't. Her hands felt too heavy, like even that small movement would be an admission of guilt. Across the room, Spice had sat back down, but her posture didn't soften. Her back was straight, her chin tilted ever so slightly, her arms crossed loosely but not lazily. Every inch of her body language screamed control. She didn't have to gloat. The calm on her face said enough. She'd done what she came to do. She had lit the match, and now she was watching the fire she started take hold. The quiet was broken by the faintest tap, 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 sharp and rhythmic against the floor. At first, it was almost ignorable, like a nervous tick, until it started to sync with the pounding in Bambi's ears. When she glanced toward the sound, her gaze landed on Mama D, seated in the far corner, but radiating a presence that was impossible to ignore. Her legs were crossed, but her foot was bouncing deliberately, the point of her heel striking the floor with a measured pace. It wasn't impatience. It was restraint. Everyone in that room knew that when Mama D reached her limit, she didn't explode without purpose. She waited until the perfect moment to make her move, and that moment had just arrived. She stood, up in one smooth motion, the scrape of her chair against the floor louder than it had any right to be. Her eyes, dark and focused, swept across the room like searchlights, cutting through whatever courage anyone might have had to speak. "Where is my son?" she asked, not shouting, but with a weight that made the question feel dangerous. It wasn't an inquiry. It was a warning. Her gaze snapped to Bambi, and for the first time since Spice pressed play, Bambi looked away entirely, her chin dipping, eyes dropping to the floor. "You've embarrassed him," Mama D continued, her voice steady and unflinching. "You've embarrassed this family, and you've embarrassed yourself." Every word landed with a precision that felt rehearsed, but this was no performance. This was a mother in defense mode. Without breaking her eye contact from Bambi, she reached into her handbag, pulled out her phone, and swiped across the screen. In a matter of seconds, she was live. Thousands of viewers flooded the stream almost instantly, hearts and shocked face emojis exploding across the screen. Her voice sharpened, her tone ringing clear even over the slight digital echo of the phone. "Mike. I'm here today not just as Scrappy's mother," she declared. "I'm here as a woman who's seen enough lies, enough manipulation, and enough of people thinking they can run game on my family without consequences. Bambi is done playing with my son's heart, and she's done playing with our name." The comment section was a blur, a storm of reactions flying by too fast to read. Some cheering her on, some demanding details, others tagging gossip pages before the clip had even finished. Mama D leaned in slightly, lowering her tone in a way that somehow made it cut deeper. "And let me make one thing real clear. I want a DNA test for that baby. I don't want whispers, I don't want excuses, and I don't want another lie told in my son's face. I want proof, and I want it in front of the world." The room shifted like a collective exhale had been sucked right back in. Bambi's breath hitched. She could feel heat rising in her chest, the kind that came from anger and fear colliding at the same time. She knew this wasn't just an accusation. This was a challenge. Every person in that room was either recording on their phone or already screen recording the live stream, ready to upload their own exclusive version before the night was over. She opened her mouth, the beginnings of a denial trembling on her lips, but Mama D didn't give her the space. "You've lied and smiled your way through too much. You thought you could keep everyone fooled forever. Well, look around you. Nobody's fooled now." The live audience was eating it up, flooding the comments with "spill it" and "tell us everything." Others throwing in their own speculations, spinning timelines out of half-truths they'd read online. Bambi stood still, forcing herself not to fidget, not to let her eyes dart toward the cameras trained on her, because she knew even the smallest movement would be replayed, slowed down, and dissected frame by frame. Across the room, Spice had shifted slightly in her chair, leaning back with one ankle resting over her knee, her gaze locked on Bambi with the patience of a predator watching its prey tire itself out. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. "This is the price of thinking you could outplay me." Bambi's phone buzzed again in her hand, harder this time, like whoever was calling wasn't going to stop. She ignored it, her fingers tightening around the device until her knuckles whitened. She knew the live was trending. She knew hashtags with her name were already forming like storm clouds over her head. And she knew that whatever she said next would decide whether she drowned or clawed her way back to the surface. But right now there was no opening to speak. Mama D was still in control, her voice unwavering. "If you think for 1 second that this is going to slide under the rug, you've picked the wrong family to play with. I will stand by my son, and I will make sure you answer for every single thing you've done." When she finally ended the live, the silence that followed wasn't relief. It was aftermath. The kind of quiet that comes after a detonation, when the ringing in your ears is still loud enough to make you dizzy. She slid her phone back into her bag and turned on her heel, walking toward the exit with the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you've said exactly what you needed to say. She didn't look back at Bambi, but she didn't have to. The damage was already done, and they both knew it. As the door closed behind her, Spice finally broke the room's paralysis with a low, calm voice that carried just enough for everyone to hear. You wanted to play the victim, but real victims don't get caught on camera. The words floated in the air like a final verdict, and Bambi could only stand there, her pulse thudding, her mind racing. She had been cornered before, but never like this. The question wasn't whether she could survive it. It was whether she could control the story before it swallowed her whole. Outside, the air felt different. Not cleaner, not fresher, just sharper, as if every breath carried tiny shards that cut at the lungs. The sun had dipped lower, bleeding streaks of orange and violet across the sky, but the beauty of it didn't register for Bambi. The sound of her heels clicking against the pavement seemed too loud, each step pulling her farther from the room. She had just left, but not far enough from the weight she carried. Her phone buzzed again in her hand, and she forced herself to look. Meet me outside. No punctuation, no emojis, no warmth. Just 3 bare words from Scrappy. They didn't feel like an invitation. They felt like a summons. Her heart quickened, but not with hope. It was the kind of acceleration that comes when you're walking toward something you can't avoid, something you've feared but also needed to face. She followed the narrow path toward the side lot, where the sounds of crew chatter were faint and the hum of a distant generator filled the space. Scrappy was already there, standing with his back to her, his shoulders squared but heavy, his head slightly bowed like he was holding something in that might break if he let it out too soon. She stopped a few paces behind him, the chill of the evening air brushing against her bare arms, goosebumps rising that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Scrappy," she said softly, the name leaving, her lips like it might be the last time she'd get to say it this way. He didn't turn immediately. He stayed still for a long moment, his hands deep in his pockets, his chest rising and falling in a rhythm that told her he was wrestling with himself. When he did finally turn, the look in his eyes wasn't rage. Rage would have been easier. Rage meant there was still energy, still something alive to fight over. This was worse. His gaze was tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep but from carrying too much for too long. "I don't even know who you are anymore," he said, his voice low but clear. "You've lied to me for so long, I don't know what was real and what wasn't." She swallowed hard, her throat dry, her hands flexing nervously at her sides. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking on the second word. "I never meant for it to go this far. I love you." He shook his head slowly, a humorless half smile tugging at the corner of his mouth before disappearing. "You don't get to say that. Not now. Not after this. You've been playing games with my life, with our life. For what? So you could keep your secret safe?" "It wasn't like that," she said quickly, her voice rising just enough to sound desperate. "I was trying to protect us. I didn't want to ruin what we had." His laugh was short, bitter, and it cut through her like glass. "Protect us? You think protecting us means being with another man and hiding it from me? You think lying day after day is some kind of twisted love?" She stepped forward, her eyes searching his face for any crack, any sign that he might still be reachable. "I didn't want to hurt you, Scrappy. I thought if I kept it quiet, I could keep us together, keep our family together." He tilted his head, studying her like he was trying to recognize the person in front of him. "You didn't just hurt me, Bambi. You broke me. You took everything we built, every ounce of trust, and you set it on fire. And the worst part is, you let me stand there in the smoke thinking we were fine." The words landed like blows she couldn't dodge. Her chest tightened, her fingers curled inward, her breath caught in her throat. "I never wanted to lose you," she said. But even to her own ears, the words sounded too small, too late. He stepped closer now, close enough that she could see the strain in his jaw, the faint tremor in his hands that he was trying to hide. "Then why?" he asked, his voice cracking despite his effort to keep it steady. "Why did you keep lying when you had 100 chances to tell me the truth?" She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The silence between them was heavy, dense with all the things she could have said and didn't, all the chances she had and wasted. He nodded once, a movement so slight it was almost imperceptible, but it was final. "You've ruined everything, Bambi," he said quietly. "And right now, I don't even know who I'm looking at." He turned then, not abruptly, but with the measured pace of someone who knew they were walking away for good. Each step he took felt like a door closing, each inch of space between them like a thread snapping. She didn't move. She couldn't. She stood there watching him disappear into the shadows at the far end of the lot, the echo of his footsteps folding into the hum of the generator. When her phone buzzed minutes later, she didn't need to read it to know what. It said, "It's over. No more, no less." She stared at the screen until the letters blurred, her grip tightening until her knuckles ached. Inside, the room was quieter now, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet that comes when people are pretending not to talk about you, but every conversation is still about you. She stepped back in, the weight of eyes following. Her immediate, the subtle hush in conversations as if everyone had agreed to pause their words until she passed. Spice was still in the corner, her legs crossed, her arm draped casually over the back of her chair, her gaze fixed on Bambi like she was watching the last act of a play she had written herself. A few cast members avoided looking at her, pretending to scroll on their phones, but their ears tilted slightly in her direction, hungry for any word, any reaction. Mama D wasn't there anymore, but she didn't have to be. Her words still clung to the air like smoke, her voice still replaying in everyone's minds, her live stream still pinging on notifications as clips circulated online. Bambi didn't sit. She didn't speak. She just stood for a moment, scanning the room, feeling the energy coil tight around her. Her heart was pounding, not from fear this time, but from something else. A spark of defiance, the stubborn core inside her that refused to go quietly. She had lost Scrappy for now, maybe for good, but she hadn't lost her ability to fight. She still had her version of the truth, and there were always people willing to listen if you gave them a story worth hearing. But tonight wasn't for fighting. Tonight was for swallowing the blow, for letting them think she was finished, for letting them underestimate her. Because the thing about being written off is that it makes people stop watching for the moment you come back. And Bambi was already thinking about that moment. She didn't know when or how, but she knew one thing for certain. When she rose, again, she'd make sure every single one of them had to watch.